For years, the Eastern Conference has been called weak, overlooked, and overshadowed by the West. But this season, the East is proving everyone wrong. While teams like the Cavs and Celtics fight for dominance and supremacy, there are others quietly lurking, ready to make their push. As the playoff race heats up, every win and loss becomes more critical. Some teams are soaring, others are struggling, and the power dynamic is slowly shifting in ways no one expected. In this video, I'll break down the Eastern Conference power rankings, showing who's rising, who's slipping, and who's making a quiet push for the top three. The rankings are set, so let's get into this. At 15, I've got the Charlotte Hornets. It's not too surprising. They've got the second worst record in the league. They've only won 1 out of their past 10 games, not including their 3-point win over the Nets. They had lost 9 in a row, including a combined losing margin of 131 points over a 3-game span against the Blazers, the Kings, and the Warriors. I think this makes them the worst team in the East, probably the worst team in the league, right? Right now, when LaMelo isn't injured, their best player is Miles Bridges, and we all know that's a bad omen. Even if their record doesn't have them as the worst team in the league, I think that their current momentum and projection has them as the team most likely to getting Big Cooper this coming offseason. At 14, I've got the Brooklyn Nets, who just lost to the Hornets to be fair, but I still gave them the slight edge over them. They did lose this game without Cam Johnson, who is their best player, and that is why I also felt they got the edge. In saying that, they could be on a downward trajectory by the way things are going right now. They've lost 7 in a row and only won 1 out of their past 9 games, which was against the 76ers on a Nicholas Claxton putback. Their losing streak could increase to 9 as well, as they play the Lakers and Cavs in their next 2 games. The big thing that they have ahead of the Hornets at least is that they've been slightly more competitive, with a negative 6.7 net rating compared to the Hornets' negative 7.5. When looking at the last 10 games, however, they have a negative 9.3 net rating compared to the Hornets' negative 18.9. They have the second worst offense in the league. They have a pretty poor top half of the roster with the likes of Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas, and Nick Claxton leading them, and mediocre depth with young pieces like Zaire Williams, Noah Clowney, and Keon Johnson. All in all, they aren't that much ahead of the Hornets, but they are just a slight bit higher in the Eastern Conference. At 13, I have the Washington Wizards, which for some might be surprising, but I think they've been solid over their past couple of weeks, with a 4-6 record in their past 10. However, they are still sitting as one of the worst records in the league, the worst at 14-49. They have the 4th worst offense in the league, scoring only 108.5 points per game, and allow the 2nd most points per game at 120.5. Over the entire season, they have the league worst net rating at a negative 11.7, which if their season ended now would have them as the 7th worst net rating by a team in NBA history, and would be the worst in the past 14 years when not including the expansion Bobcats. It would be the worst since the turn of the century. However, in their past 10, their net rating has improved to a negative 4.1, which still isn't great, but is improvement nonetheless, and is only the 8th worst in the entire league in that 10-game sample size. At 12th, I have what was expected to be one of the contenders in a weak Eastern Conference, in the Philadelphia 76ers. The team who was meant to be pushing for a top 4 seed in the East, led by MVP Joel Embiid on a comeback season, Tyrese Maxey, who was expected to make even more leaps and bounds from his previous All-Star year, and Paul George has fallen to the 11th seed in the East and only 1 game away from the 13th seed. Though they may be pushing for a play-in spot when you look at their seeding, they have lost 13 out of their last 16 games and have had Joel Embiid be put on ice for the rest of the season due to another knee injury. Along with that, they've had Tyrese Maxey injured as well as of late, who hasn't played in the last 4 games, and in 2 games prior to that, shot a combined 4 for 27 from the field, scoring only 5 points a game in those 2 games. Paul George has been arguably the biggest disappointment by any player this season, averaging only 16.2 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 4.3 assists, and has missed a third of this season due to a slew of injuries. The only shining light as of right now is their trade deadline acquisition of Quentin Grimes, who in his past 10 is averaging 19 points, 5 rebounds and 3.6 assists a game. However, with all these pieces, they still rank as the 5th worst offense in the league, only scoring an abysmal 109.3 points per game. The Raptors have been one of the more interesting teams this year. Sitting at a poor 21 wins and 43 losses, you would think they have one of the worst rosters in the league. But they actually have some solid top-end pieces, like RJ Barrett, who has had a resurgent year, and Scotty Barnes. They also have solid young players in Emmanuel Quickley and Grady Dick. However, as of 64 games into the season, they still haven't managed to put it all together. They are 4-6 in their last 10, and out of those wins, 2 have been one-score wins. They lost a game they should have won against the Wizards, but I still think their top-end talent puts them slightly ahead of the Wizards, and the eventual return of Brandon Ingram, who they picked up at the trade deadline, could push them even higher on this list. However, due to all the injuries and the lack of performance, I still have them sitting at the 11th spot right now, with room to rise, however. The Chicago Bulls have been solid enough this season, but have been the epitome of mid this year. No offense to any Bulls fans, of course. They sit at an average 26th and 38 and have won 3 of their last 5, but only 4 of their last 10. Like I said, mid. They have the 9th best offense in the league, led by the likes of Nikola Vucevic, who has been good this year. Kobe White, who though hasn't taken an all-star leap this year, has still improved, and Josh Giddey, who they got in the offseason. Their issue, however, has been their dead last ranking in defense, giving up a whopping 120.6 points per game and allowing the 2nd best opponent 3-point percentage this year, which when you look at the roster construction isn't too surprising when led by a team of guards in Josh Giddey and Kobe White, and a big man in the middle in Nikola Vucevic. However, they will still most likely make the play-in because they're in the East. At 9, I have the Miami Heat, who have been pretty average since the trade of Jimmy Butler, being 1-4 in their last 5 and 3-6 in their past 9 games. They're sitting at 5 games under 500 at 29-34, but have been on a steady decline as of late. They have a great duo in Tyler Hero, who is having close to an All-NBA season, averaging 24, 5 and 6 on solid enough efficiency of 46% from the field, 37% from 3 and 86% from the free throw. They also have Bam Adebayo, who is averaging 18 points, 10 rebounds and 4 assists with good defense. But in his past 5, he's averaging 27, 11 and 4 a game on 56% from the field. Their issues this season have been their offense, where they rank at the 6th worst, only scoring 110.1 points per game due to their lack of depth. They also picked up Andrew Wiggins in the Jimmy Butler trade, who has been solid enough this year, but like the team as a whole, he has only been solid. The Atlanta Hawks, who sit at the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference, sit at 8 in my power rankings. They have the 5th best offense in the league, being led by their star guard Trae Young, who probably should have been an all-star this year, averaging 23.8 points and a league-leading 11.5 assists per game. And if he continued that production, it would be the most in a season since Russell Westbrook in 2021. They're also led by a potentially most improved player of the year in Dyson Daniels, who is averaging 14 points, 5.6 rebounds and 4.1 assists, and is leading the league in steals per game right now by a full steal. It would also be the most steals in a season by a player since 1992. However, their biggest issue is the same issue that has always followed Trae Young in the Hawks era. It's their poor defense, having the 4th worst defense in the league, allowing 119.7 points a game. Another thing that probably set them back this year and has set a cap on their potential playoff hopes was the injury to Jalen Johnson and him being out for the season from January 24th with the left shoulder injury. At 7th, I have the most unique team in the league. The Orlando Magic find themselves at a record of 30-35 and sitting at 8th in the Eastern Conference. The reason why I believe they're the most unique team in the league is because of the fact that they allow the least amount of points per game this season, with only 106.2 points per game, which is better than both the Thunder and Cavaliers, but they rank at dead last in points per game, averaging 104.6 and being last in 3-point percentage and 4th worst in field goal percentage. Led by their star duo in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, they have found themselves being on the most unpredictable teams in the league. With a 2-6 record in their last 8 and having the 11th worst net rating in the East in that span, I still believe that a duo of Paolo and Franz could still be competitive in an Eastern Conference playoff series, even if their record doesn't show that. The Pacers are coming in at 6th in my power rankings, with a top 9 offense and the 3rd best field goal percentage in the league and the 6th best 3-point percentage in the league. They have a solid record of 35-27, putting them at the 5th seed in the East. Their offense carries them in the areas where their defense falls short, as they have a bottom 11 points allowed per game and don't have any particularly defensively focused players, with the only one potentially being Miles Turner and partially Pascal Siakam. Their offense, however, could have them winning a playoff series if Tyrese Halliburton can put it together for a 7-game series, even though he's had a pretty below average year. Pascal Siakam as well, if he can put it together for a series, could push any team to a 7-game series. At the 5th spot, I have the biggest gap between seeding and ranking. The New York Knicks have been good this year, sitting at the 3rd seed in the East, tied for the 2nd, but have lost their past 3 games and are only 3-5 in their last 8 games. They have the 4th worst net rating in their past 10 games. They have the 7th best offense and the 13th best defense, and have loads of depth in key players such as Cat, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Josh Hart. However, that depth doesn't go to their bench, with their best piece off the bench being an underperforming Deuce McBride. However, the key talking point about this team is the fact that they are 0-7 versus the Celtics, Thunder, and Cavs, and are 12-16 against teams with above a 500 record. And so lately, they've been given the title of frauds. Along with that, Jalen Brunson is expected to be out for the next 2 weeks, so they could be on an even steeper dive as well. At 4th, I have the Milwaukee Bucks, who have a record of 36-27 and are 7-3 in their last 10 games, with losing 2 in a row, so prior to that they were 8-1 in their last 9 games. They have the 12th best offense and defense in the league and have finally figured out how to run a team with a duo of Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I do think though that the addition of Kyle Kuzma is in reality a net negative. With spacing issues already being present, Kyle Kuzma doesn't help that, but he is still nonetheless solid for his position. They also have the 5th best net rating in the East in the past 10 games and have cemented themselves as one of the almost contenders in the league. However, they are still having issues with depth outside of Giannis and Dame. They only have one player who averages 15 points a game outside of those two, and it could prove an issue in a playoff series if that team knows how to guard the dynamic duo. At the 3 spot, I have my biggest riser in the up-and-coming Detroit Pistons, who as of 65 games into the season have already 2.5 times their record from last year and have cemented themselves as clearly the most improved team. As a whole this year, and potentially on pace for a 50-win season after only winning 14 games the year before. If they win out at least 10 of their next 17 games, they would have at least a top 5 single-season record turnaround. But when talking about the current team, they are led by superstar guard Cade Cunningham, averaging 25.6 points per game, 6.1 rebounds, and a 3rd in assists per game, averaging 9.3, and is looking like potentially a top 5 point guard in the league. They had the 3rd best net rating in the East in the past 10 games, as well, only behind the Cavs and Celtics, who we all know are serious championship contenders. The team as a whole is 11th in points per game and 15th in defensive points allowed, and they could be a smoky for a conference championship. At 2, I have the reigning champions in the Boston Celtics, who have the most all-round team and are minimum top 3 in the league, with arguments to be made for being even higher than that. There isn't much to say about them that hasn't already been said. They're doing the same great things they were doing last year, ranking at 3rd in defensive points allowed and 6th in points scored per game. They have the depth upon depth, with 6 players scoring double digits and 5 scoring at least 14 points a game. Led by the superstar duo in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who combined average 50 points a game and bring valuable defense as well. They have Peyton Pritchard, who is arguably the 6th man of the year, along with Drew Holiday, who is their go-to defensive stalwart. They're 8-2 in their last 10, with the 2nd best net rating in that span, only behind who I have at first in my Eastern Power Rankings. I mean, if we're being real, are we surprised? No one was expecting anyone else at the top of this power ranking. The Cavaliers have the best record in the league. As of recording, they are in the middle of a 14-game win streak. And in that 14-game span, they've had the best offense and the 4th best defense in the entire league, not just the East. As a whole season, they have the best offense in the league, scoring 123 points a game on average, and the 10th best defense in the league, which is led by their potentially defensive player of the year big man in Evan Mobley. On offense, they have the dynamic duo in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, who together are averaging 44 points a game. As with the Celtics, they have the same depth, as 6 players are averaging double-digit points per game, including the addition of DeAndre Hunter, who adds even more depth to this team that's only potential weakness was their lack of wing depth and their lack of a wing defender. They have the 2nd best net rating in the league this season with an 11 net rating, and have 2 of the top 4 players in the league in plus-minus, with Evan Mobley with a 9.2 plus-minus and Donovan Mitchell with an 8.4 this season. They're head and shoulders above the rest of the teams in the East, and that's why they sit at number 1 in my Eastern Power Rankings and the best record in the NBA right now, and could be your 2025 NBA champions. Well, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my video, leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, check out my channel and subscribe. If you have any comments about my power ranking, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video.